When the Mafia king knelt for the waitress nobody saw, the ballroom went silent the moment Adrian Moretti raised his glass and said 6 words that shouldn't have been possible. 300 of Washington's most powerful people turned their heads at once. Senators, diplomats, old money, and older jewelry. And standing at the center of it all, trembling in borrowed shoes, was a waitress named Lila Hart, a girl who had walked in that night praying nobody would notice her, now staring down a room that would never forget her. Before we begin, drop a like and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels. The service elevator smelled like old grease and older cigarettes, and Lila Hart pressed her forehead against the cool metal wall, trying to remember how to breathe. 6 floors up. 6 floors between her and a room full of people who had never, not once in their lives, worried about a $32 prescription. She closed her eyes, counted backward from 10 like the nurse at Georgetown had taught her mother to do during the bad nights. 10. 9. 8. The elevator lurched. 7. Her stomach went with it. First time at the Carrington. Lila's eyes snapped open. A woman in her 50s, gray hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, was watching her from the opposite corner. A tray of champagne flutes balanced on one hip. A name tag that read, Margaret, team lead clipped to a black vest that had seen 1,000 of these nights. That obvious? Lila managed. You're green around the mouth, sweetheart. Margaret smiled, and it was the kind of smile that had nothing to do with being kind and everything to do with surviving. Don't look anyone in the eye. Don't speak unless they speak first. And if a man touches your backside, you smile like he just gave you a compliment and you move on. Understood? Understood. What's your name again? Lila. Lila Hart. Lila. Margaret nodded like she was filing it somewhere. You're on champagne rotation. That means you float. You don't stop moving unless somebody stops you. And even then, you keep those feet itching. You freeze in a room like this. You're a ghost, and ghosts get stepped on. The elevator chimed. The doors slid open onto a hallway so gold and so soft that for a second Lila forgot she was the help. Then she remembered. She had been remembering for 3 months straight. Her mother had collapsed in the kitchen on a Tuesday in August. Lila had come home from her shift at the diner to find Eleanor Hart on the linoleum, a coffee mug shattered beside her, the radio still playing some commercial about car insurance. The ambulance had come. The doctors had come. The diagnosis had come, slower, in careful sentences that Lila had made them repeat twice because her ears kept refusing the words. Stage 3. Aggressive. Treatable, yes, but only with a specific protocol. Out of network. The kind of medicine that costs what a house costs. The kind of medicine insurance companies write polite letters about, explaining why they are very sorry, but Lila had been a junior at George Mason, 2 semesters from a degree in social work. She had dropped out the following Monday. Not with tears, not with drama. She had walked into the registrar's office and signed the papers and walked back out into a September that felt like somebody had turned the color down on the world. Now it was November. 3 jobs. 4 hours of sleep if she was lucky. And tonight, the golden ticket, a last-minute catering gig at the Carrington Hotel's annual Beltway Charity Gala. $800 for one night's work, because the regular staffer had twisted an ankle and the agency was desperate, and Margaret had taken pity on her over the phone. $800 was 1 round of her mother's injections. $800 was the difference between December and whatever came after December. Lila stepped out of the elevator. The ballroom looked like something carved from the inside of a seashell. Pale gold walls. A ceiling that arched up into chandeliers the size of small cars. An orchestra tucked discreetly behind a row of white orchids, playing something that Lila vaguely recognized as Gershwin. Women in gowns that cost more than cars. Men in tuxedos that fit the way tuxedos fit when you had not bought them off a rack in your life. And the smell. The smell was the part that got her. It smelled expensive, like leather and perfume, and the clean, dry air of a place where nobody ever had to open a window because the climate was simply handled. She took a tray from the pass, 12 flutes of champagne. She held it the way Margaret had shown her in the kitchen, fingers underneath, thumb along the rim, shoulder straight. She stepped onto the floor. Nobody looked at her. That was the trick she was realizing. In a room like this, a person in black and white became furniture. You could walk right past a senator and he would not register your face, because your face was not part of the evening's inventory. You were a moving surface for beverages. That was all. And Lila, for the first time in a long time, was grateful to be nothing. She circled the floor. She offered her tray. Women lifted flutes with 2 fingers and never broke the threads of their conversation. One man, fat, red-faced, a pin on his lapel she didn't recognize, took a glass and swatted her lightly on the hip as she turned away. Lila smiled. Margaret's words. Smile like he just gave you a compliment. She kept moving. She was halfway through her second rotation when she felt it, the change in the room. It wasn't loud. That was what she remembered afterward, what she told herself at 4 a.m, lying in bed with the ceiling fan ticking. The room didn't go quiet, exactly. People didn't stop talking, but something slid sideways, a pressure shift, the way the light went strange right before a thunderstorm. She turned, without meaning to, toward the door. Adrian Moretti had a way of walking into a room that wasn't walking at all. He didn't stride. He didn't announce himself. He simply arrived the way weather arrived, and everybody in the ballroom adjusted to him without knowing it was adjusting. He was tall, not freakishly so, maybe 6'2". Black hair cut short on the sides, slightly longer on top. A little damp at the temples like he'd showered within the hour. A jaw that looked like it had been drawn with a ruler. A charcoal suit that fit him the way skin fit a hand. No tie. Collar open 1 button. And his eyes, Lila couldn't see them from across the room, but she could feel them, because the people he passed all looked anywhere except directly at his face. 2 men flanked him, not close enough to be bodyguards, close enough to be understood. A woman at the nearest cocktail table, diamonds in her ears the size of pencil erasers, leaned to her companion and whispered something. Lila caught the edge of it as she passed. Didn't think he'd actually come. He never comes. Well, he's here. Don't stare, Patricia. Lila moved past them. She did not stare. She did not, in fact, look at Adrian Moretti at all, because every nerve in her body was telling her that a man like that was exactly the kind of man you did not see and did not let see you. Not in a room like this, not in a uniform like this, not if you wanted to end the night the same person you'd started it. She rounded the orchestra and ducked toward the service door. She needed a new tray. She needed also a minute. In the kitchen, Margaret was barking at someone about the shrimp. Lila set her empty tray on the pass and leaned against the steel counter, letting the cold seep through her blouse. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. A text. From St. Agnes Home Care. Your mother had a reaction at 6:42 p.m. We've stabilized her. Please call when you can. Lila's legs forgot their job for a second. She caught the edge of the counter. Oh no, she whispered. She hit the call button. The line rang, rang, rang. Voicemail. She hit it again. Voicemail again. Heart, Margaret's voice sharp across the kitchen. Floor, now. Margaret, you need to do the job you're being paid to do. Whatever it is can wait 20 minutes. It's my mom. They said she had a... Margaret's face did something complicated. For a half second, the hardness broke, and something underneath showed through, something tired and sorry. Then it closed again. 20 minutes, Margaret said. Then I'll cover you on break and you can make whatever calls you need. But right now, there are 300 people out there and 14 of us. Floor. Now. Lila nodded. She couldn't make her mouth form words. She grabbed a fresh tray. 12 more flutes, perfectly balanced. And she pushed back through the door into the gold and the music and the smell of perfume. She was crying. A little. Not enough to notice if you weren't looking. A wet line down one cheek that she wiped with the back of her wrist as she walked, and the tray wobbled, just slightly, and 2 of the flutes kissed each other with a tiny high ping. She didn't see him until she was 3 feet from him. She had been looking at her feet. That was the thing. She had been counting the squares of the parquet floor, trying to get her breathing back, trying to put a wall between her body and her chest. And when she looked up, she was standing almost in Adrian Moretti's shadow. He was alone. That was the strange part. The 2 men who had flanked him through the door had drifted to a respectful distance, and a small bubble of empty space had formed around him in the middle of the ballroom, the way space formed around a man people wanted to approach but did not quite dare. And he was looking at her, directly at her. Lila's first instinct was to look past him, through him, the way Margaret had taught her. Her second instinct was to lower the tray and offer him a glass, because that was her job, and the job was all she had. She did the second thing. Her hand shook, just barely. "Champagne, sir?" Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. She cleared her throat. She tried again. "Champagne?" His eyes, dark, almost black, the kind of eyes you couldn't read because they weren't offering anything to read, moved from her face down to the tray and back up to her face. He did not take a glass. "You've been crying," he said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even concern, really. It was an observation, the way a man might say it's raining when you walked in with wet hair. "No, sir. I'm fine, sir." "You're not fine. Would you like a glass of—" "No." Lila's throat went tight. She was not supposed to be standing here. She was not supposed to be talking to this man. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to retreat, to fold herself back into the invisibility of the uniform, to disappear. "Then excuse me, sir," she said, and started to step around him. He didn't move. He didn't reach out. He didn't do anything. But somehow, without touching her, he had kept her there. She stopped. The tray trembled. "What's your name?" "Sir, I'm not asking to be rude. I'm asking because I'd like to know." Up close, his voice was softer than she had expected. There was something old world about it. Not an accent exactly. A weight. Like every word had to be considered before it came out of his mouth. "Lila," she said. She couldn't think of a reason to lie. She couldn't think of anything, really. "Lila Hart. Lila Hart." He repeated it like he was testing the fit. Then quieter. "Something happened." "I'm sorry?" "Something happened. Just now. Before you came back onto the floor. Something bad." She stared at him. The chandelier swam a little. Her mother. The reaction. The voicemail she couldn't get through to. The $800 she was going to lose if Margaret fired her for standing here too long. It rose up in her throat all at once, and she couldn't push it back down. "My mother," she said. The word cracked in half. Adrian Moretti did not move, did not shift his weight, did not do any of the things people did when they were trying to figure out how to leave a conversation. "Where is she?" "Sir, I really have to— Lila!" Just her name. The way he said it, low, even, like he was setting something heavy down carefully, froze her in place. "Where is she?" "Home. Alexandria. There's a nurse. She had a reaction to her medication, they said, and nobody is answering the phone, and I can't. She was losing it, right there, in the middle of the Carrington ballroom, with a tray of $12 champagne in her hands, in front of a man whose name she still didn't know. Adrian's hand moved, not toward her, toward his own jacket. He slid a phone out of an inside pocket. It was the first phone she had ever seen a person use, like it was also a weapon. He pressed something with his thumb, put it to his ear. "Tommy, the address of a nurse's line that hasn't been picked up in the last 20 minutes. Patient's name Hart, first name." He looked at her. "Eleanor," Lila whispered. "Eleanor Hart. Eleanor Hart. Alexandria, Virginia. I want someone there in 15 minutes. A doctor. The best one we have on call. I don't care what he's doing. I want an ambulance as backup, private, not public. And I want a direct line to whoever is on scene when they get there. Understood." He hung up. The whole exchange had taken maybe 20 seconds. Lila stood there holding her tray. "Sir?" she said. Her voice came out as a croak. I don't know who you are, but I can't accept." "You're not accepting anything. You're going to get your coat. You're going to meet me at the service entrance. My driver will take us to your mother. We're leaving now." "Sir?" "Now, Lila." That's him. Later, she would not remember crossing the ballroom. She would remember Margaret's face when she pushed back into the kitchen, tray forgotten on a pass, coat pulled off the hook, keys and phone clutched in one white-knuckled hand. She would remember Margaret starting to say something, the beginning of a "where do you think you're going?" the sharp breath of it, and then stopping because someone was standing in the kitchen doorway, and everyone in the kitchen had gone quiet. Adrian, in the kitchen, a Mafia boss. In a Carrington banquet kitchen, standing very still between the walk-in freezer and a speed rack full of dirty dessert plates. Margaret straightened. Her face went through 3 expressions in 1 second and landed on a careful, professional blankness. "Mr. Moretti?" "Margaret." He nodded at her. He knew her name. Of course he knew her name. "Miss Hart is leaving with me. Her pay for the night will be taken care of. I'd consider it a personal favor." "Of course, sir." "Thank you." He put a hand lightly, so lightly, at the small of Lila's back, not touching, just guiding. And he walked her out of the kitchen, down a service corridor she hadn't seen on the way in, and through a steel door into a cold November night that smelled like wet pavement and exhaust. A black car was already waiting. She didn't remember anyone calling it. A driver in a black coat opened the back door. Adrian gestured her in first. She sat. He slid in beside her. The door closed with a thick, expensive sound. The car pulled away from the curb. "How is this possible?" Lila said. She wasn't asking him. She was asking the roof of the car. "How is any of this possible?" Adrian didn't answer. He was on his phone again. Different voice this time, harder. "Talk to me." A pause. "How long was she unresponsive?" A pause. "What did they give her?" A pause. No, you tell him I don't care what his protocol is. I want Dr. Rice on the phone in 4 minutes, or there will be a conversation he does not want to have." "Yes." 4 minutes. He hung up. He finally looked at her. In the low light of the car, his eyes were not black. They were a dark brown, almost the color of the inside of a good whiskey bottle. There were lines at the corners she hadn't noticed before. He was older than she'd thought. 38, maybe. 40. "Your mother is breathing," he said. "Her pulse is weak but stable." The nurse panicked because she didn't know how to handle an allergic reaction to one of the infusion drugs. That's what we know right now. There is a doctor 11 minutes out. Lila's hands were shaking. She tried to put them in her lap and they kept shaking. "I don't understand," she said. "I don't understand why you're doing this." He looked at her for a long moment. "Neither do I," he said finally. "Not entirely." Traffic on the George Washington Parkway was light. The Potomac moved past the right side of the car like a dark, oily ribbon. The driver, whose name Lila would learn later was Marco, did not speak. Adrian did not speak for almost a full minute. Lila watched the lights of the bridges go by and tried to breathe through her nose the way her mother's old yoga tape had taught her when she was 14. "What does she have?" Adrian said. "I'm sorry?" "Your mother. The illness." Lila swallowed. "Lymphoma. Stage 3. She's been on a protocol out of Johns Hopkins, but we had to switch to something cheaper 3 weeks ago. The insurance, there was a thing with the insurance." "What thing?" "They denied the appeal. The drug she was on is considered experimental for her subtype. So we moved to the generic backup. I don't know, it's what we could afford." "How much is the drug she was on?" "Sir, how much?" $4,200 an infusion, every 3 weeks. "And the generic?" $800. "Which is why you were working tonight." "Which is why I was working tonight." Adrian looked out the window. A muscle in his jaw jumped just once, like he had bitten down on a word and swallowed it. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay? Okay." He did not explain what he meant, but something in the way he said it made Lila's spine loosen, just a little, for the first time in 3 months. The word landed in her chest like a stone finding the bottom of a well. Okay. Like someone else was holding part of it now. The house in Alexandria was small. A 2-bedroom colonial on a street of other 2-bedroom colonials, brown siding, a porch with a wicker chair that had been there since Lila's father died in 2009. The porch light was on. A white panel van with no markings was parked at the curb. 2 men in dark clothes stood near it. One was speaking into a phone. "Those are ours," Adrian said quietly. "Don't be alarmed." "Okay?" Lila said. The word was a lifeline now. She kept using it. "Okay." The driver opened her door. She got out and the cold hit her, and she stumbled. Adrian was there, not holding her, not touching, but there, a hand hovering at her elbow without connecting. And she found her feet and she crossed the little strip of lawn and she climbed the porch steps and she pushed open the front door. Her mother was on the couch, alive, pale, propped up with pillows. An IV bag hung from a portable pole beside her. A man in a dark coat and wire-rimmed glasses, the doctor, she understood immediately, was taking her mother's blood pressure with quiet, efficient movements. Another man, younger, sat nearby with a black case open at his feet, full of vials and instruments Lila didn't recognize. Eleanor's eyes were open. They found her daughter. "Oh," Eleanor said. The word came out thin. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." Lila's legs went. She crossed the room on something that was not quite walking, and she dropped to her knees beside the couch, and she put her face against her mother's shoulder, and she sobbed, once, a single hard sound that came out of her like something breaking. Eleanor's hand, thin, too thin, the skin translucent, came up and rested on the back of her head. "I'm okay," Eleanor whispered. "I'm okay, baby. I'm okay." The doctor stepped back discreetly. Adrian stood in the doorway. He didn't come in. He watched, for one moment, with an expression Lila did not turn around to see. And if she had, she might not have known how to read it, because Adrian Moretti had not looked at a woman the way he was looking at the back of Lila Hart's head in at least 15 years, and probably not ever. Then he turned and went back out onto the porch to give them a minute. The doctor's name was Rice. He had kind eyes behind the glasses and a quiet, deliberate way of moving that reminded Lila of every good doctor she had ever met and none of the bad ones. He sat with her at the kitchen table while Eleanor dozed on the couch, and he walked her through what had happened. "Your mother had what we call a type 1 hypersensitivity reaction to one of the components in the generic formulation. It's rare. It's not something anyone could have predicted. The nurse your agency sent was not, how do I say this, not adequately trained for oncology patients. She panicked. That's the polite word. She didn't pick up my calls. She didn't pick up anyone's calls. She'd stepped outside to smoke. Mr. Moretti's people found her on the porch. Oh my God. I'm not the one to file complaints with, Miss Hart, but if I were you, I would be having a very firm conversation with that agency in the morning. In the meantime," he set a small white card on the table. "My personal cell. If anything happens with your mother in the next 72 hours, you call that number. Not the agency, not 911. Me. I will be there in under an hour." "Dr. Rice, I don't know how this is being paid for. Miss Hart." He tapped the card gently. "Call the number if there's a problem. That's all I'd like you to do tonight." He rose, packed his case. At the door he paused and looked back at her. "She's going to be all right. Tonight, I mean. The next few weeks are a different conversation, but tonight she's going to be all right." Lila sat at the kitchen table after he left and looked at her mother's chipped mug of tea going cold on the counter, and she cried without making any sound at all. "Money?" Adrian was on the porch. His coat was too thin for the weather, but he didn't seem to notice. He was looking at the street. A few houses down, someone had started stringing up Christmas lights 2 weeks too early. The blue bulbs threw a faint glow across the lawns. Lila stepped out, closed the door quietly behind her, wrapped her arms around herself. "Dr. Rice is very good," Adrian said without turning around. "He said she's going to be okay. Tonight. He said tonight." "Good." "Mr. Moretti. Adrian. Adrian." The name felt strange in her mouth. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Not right now. You've had a long night. Go inside. Sit with her. I'll wait out here until you're ready to talk, or I'll leave if that's easier. Both are fine." "Why are you doing this?" He turned, finally. The porch light caught the side of his face and softened it a little. He looked tired, not like someone who had done a lot tonight, like someone who had been tired for a long time and had just for a moment allowed himself to show it. "I told you in the car, I'm not sure." "That's not an answer." "No, it isn't." They stood there for a moment. Her breath made small white shapes in the cold. He didn't seem to breathe out at all, which was probably a trick of the light, but she noticed it anyway. "Can I tell you something?" he said. "Okay. I walked into that ballroom tonight because I was required to. There were 6 people inside that room I needed to be seen by, and one of them needed to be reminded of something. That was the extent of my intention for the evening. I was going to stand near a pillar for 20 minutes, drink nothing, leave. Okay. And then a waitress came past me with a tray, and her hands were shaking, and she had a tear drying on her cheek that she had tried to wipe off, and He stopped. A breath escaped him then, finally, a short white cloud. I can't tell you why I looked at you. I don't have a reason. I have been in a lot of rooms. I have seen a lot of people cry. Usually I walk past. Why didn't you walk past tonight? I don't know. Maybe you should have. He smiled. It was such an unexpected thing on his face that Lila almost took a step back. It was small and quick, and it did something to the corners of his eyes. Maybe I should have, he said. I suspect we'll find out. She went back inside. She sat on the floor beside the couch and held her mother's hand until Eleanor's breathing went deep and even and she was asleep. Then she got up stiffly and she walked to the window and she looked out. The black car was still there. 2 of Adrian's men stood near it. The doctor's car was gone. The neighbor's blue Christmas lights were still on. Adrian was leaning against the hood of his car. He had his phone to his ear again. Even from the window, she could see that he was not speaking to a subordinate anymore. His shoulders were different, tighter, squared against something invisible. He listened. He said something. He listened again. His free hand came up and ran once, hard through his hair. Then he hung up. He stood there for a long moment, staring at nothing. Then he put the phone away and he looked up, directly at the window, as if he had known all along that she was standing there, and he held her eyes for one long second. Lila pulled the curtain closed. She made tea she did not drink. She sat at the kitchen table with the white card Dr. Rice had given her, and she ran her thumb across the embossed lettering again and again until her thumb started to feel hot. She could hear the soft sounds of her mother sleeping down the hall. She could hear the old refrigerator cycling on and off. She could hear, very faintly, the murmur of 2 men outside speaking in a language she thought might be Italian. The kitchen clock said 11:47 p.m. 3 hours ago she had been a waitress. 3 hours ago she had known who she was. Now there was a doctor's private cell phone number on her kitchen table, and a car full of armed men outside her front door, and a man leaning against that car who had, by all appearances, spent a significant amount of money and political capital in the last 2 hours for reasons he himself could not fully explain. Lila put her face in her hands. "Mom," she whispered. "Mom, what have I done?" Eleanor, of course, did not answer. Eleanor was asleep down the hall, alive, stable, breathing, because a stranger had lifted a phone in a ballroom and said, "I want someone there in 15 minutes. Lila rose. She pulled on her mother's old cardigan from the back of the kitchen chair. She walked to the front door. She opened it. Adrian was still leaning against the car. He straightened when she stepped out. "She's asleep," Lila said. "Good. Dr. Rice said we should have someone qualified stay with her through the night. The agency nurse, he said I shouldn't have her back." "She won't be back. I've already spoken to the agency." "Okay. I have a private nurse on the way. Her name is Catalina. She's been with my aunt for 11 years. She'll stay as long as you need her to. She's already cleared with Dr. Rice." Lila looked at him. She had a whole list of things to say. Objections, questions. "I cannot possibly accept this. Who are you? What are you going to want in return?" They all sat in her throat and did not come out, because underneath the list was something simpler and more frightening, which was that she did not want him to go. That was the thing. Standing there on her porch, with her dying mother down the hall and a stranger on the curb, she did not want him to go. "Why did your hand run through your hair?" she said. Adrian blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Earlier, on the phone, you were calm with the doctor, you were calm with the driver, you were calm with me. Then you got a different call and your hand went through your hair and you looked like someone had just told you someone died. Who was it?" He was quiet for a long time, long enough that she thought maybe he wouldn't answer. "It was my uncle," he said finally. "He runs certain parts of a certain family business with me. He had heard, through his own sources, that I was currently standing on a porch in Alexandria, Virginia, outside the home of a waitress whose name he didn't know. He wanted to know what I was doing." "What did you tell him?" "I told him I was helping a woman I had just met save her mother's life." "What did he say?" Adrian looked up at the dark sky. A plane blinked past, very high, very slow. He said, "Adrian, you've just made her a target." He looked back down at her. His face was unreadable again. And he's correct. He usually is. That's the trouble with him. Lila's pulse kicked up, low in her throat. She tightened her mother's cardigan around her shoulders. A target of what? Of people who pay attention to me, which is a great many people, some of whom do not like me very much, some of whom, as of about 90 minutes ago, have noticed that for the first time in a long time, there is someone I appear to care about. Do you understand what I'm saying to you, Lila? She understood. She understood more than she wanted to. She nodded. Once. "I didn't plan this," he said. "I want you to know that. I don't want you to think for a second that I walked into that ballroom tonight with any idea that I was going to walk out holding a piece of your life in my hand. I didn't, but I am holding it now, and I am not sure I know how to put it down." "Then put it down," she whispered. It didn't sound like her own voice. "Go home! Forget you saw me. Nobody has to know." "Someone already knows." "Then I'll disappear. We'll move. My mother and I will—" "Lila." His voice was so gentle. It was the gentlest thing she had ever heard a man say, and it broke her. "You can't outrun the people I would need to hide you from, not without help." "Then what?" "Then you let me think." She nodded again. Her eyes had filled without her permission. He saw it. He did not come closer. He did not reach for her. He simply stood there, across the distance of the porch and the lawn, and he looked at her with an expression she could not name. "Go inside," he said. "Sit with your mother. The nurse will be here in 20 minutes. My men will be at the end of the street tonight. You will not see them. They will see anyone who comes near this house." "Adrian, tomorrow I am going to come back. Not as a stranger from a ballroom, not with a driver and a doctor and a whole night of miracles. Just a man. At your door. At a reasonable hour. And I'm going to sit with you in your kitchen, and I'm going to tell you exactly who I am, and exactly what my life is, and exactly what loving me would cost a person. And then I'm going to ask you clearly whether you want any part of it. And whatever you say, Lila, whatever you say, I will accept. Do you understand me?" She understood him. She nodded, because her mouth could not produce words. He inclined his head, just slightly. A small, almost old-fashioned gesture. Then he turned and he got into the back of the black car, and the car pulled slowly away from the curb and down the quiet Alexandria street and around the corner and out of sight. Lila stood on the porch in her mother's cardigan, and she watched the place where the car had been until the cold drove her inside. At 12:23 a.m., Catalina arrived. A short, strong-looking woman in her 60s with silver hair pinned up and a soft Puerto Rican accent, and a bag of medical supplies that put the agency nurses to shame. She took Eleanor's vitals with the gentle, practiced hands of someone who had done this 10,000 times. She smiled at Lila. She made her a sandwich. She made her eat it. "Sleep, mija," Catalina said, settling into the armchair beside the couch with a paperback. "I am here. You sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." "I don't think I can sleep." "You will. Close your eyes. I will wake you if anything changes. I promise you that." Lila went to her bedroom. She did not change out of her clothes. She lay on top of the covers, in her black catering blouse and her black slacks, and the stupid cheap shoes that had given her a blister on her left heel, and she stared at the ceiling. On her nightstand, Dr. Rice's card gleamed in the dark. She thought about Adrian's face in the porch light. She thought about the phrase, "I am holding it now, and I'm not sure I know how to put it down." She thought about an uncle she had never met, somewhere in a room she would never see, being told that his nephew had just made a waitress a target. She closed her eyes. She did not sleep, but she rested. Her body, at least, rested. Her mind was somewhere else entirely, somewhere dark and strange, and for the first time in 3 months, not alone. Outside, at the far end of the block, a dark sedan idled in the cold, its headlights off. 2 men inside drank bad coffee from paper cups and watched the street. They did not speak. They did not need to. They were very good at their jobs. And in a high, glass-walled office 32 miles away, on the top floor of a building he owned through 4 shell companies, Adrian Moretti stood at the window with a tumbler of something amber in his hand and watched the lights of the city he had spent 2 decades learning how to rule. He was thinking about a tray of champagne flutes, He was thinking about a tear on the cheek of a girl he had never met. He was thinking about a phone call with his uncle that was going to be the least of his problems by the end of the week. And underneath all of it, quieter, older, a thing he had not felt in so long he had forgotten the name of it, he was thinking, she didn't ask me for anything. In 2 hours, in a crisis, in a car, on a porch. She didn't ask me for a single thing. He drained the glass. He set it down on the sill with a small, final sound. Somewhere in the dark below, a siren went past, faint and far away. And then there was only the hum of the city and the soft tick of the old clock on the office wall, and the beginning, though neither of them yet knew it, of a war. The knock came at 9:04 on Saturday morning, which was 4 minutes after the reasonable hour Adrian Moretti had named, and 3 hours after Lila Hart had given. The knock came at 9:04 on Saturday morning, which was 4 minutes after the reasonable hour Adrian Moretti had named, and 3 hours after Lila Hart had given up on sleep for the second night in a row. She had showered. She had put on jeans and a soft gray sweater that used to be her mother's. She had tied her hair back, looked at herself in the bathroom mirror, pulled it out, tied it back again. She had stared at her own face in the fluorescent light and tried to see whatever it was he had seen last night in the Carrington ballroom, and she could not see it. She saw a tired girl. A girl with circles under her eyes and chapped lips, and the memory of a tray of champagne still in her shoulder. Catalina had made coffee. The whole house smelled of it. Eleanor was awake on the couch, color back in her face, a thin book of crossword puzzles open on her lap, pretending not to notice that her daughter had checked on her 4 times in the last hour. "Honey," Eleanor had said on the 4th check gently, without looking up, "if you keep hovering, I'm going to ask Catalina to sedate you." "Mom, I'm serious. The man saved my life. I'm not going to fall over in the next 10 minutes out of dramatic timing." Lila had laughed. A small, wet laugh. She had sat down on the edge of the couch, and her mother had taken her hand and held it without saying anything, because Eleanor Hart had always known, since Lila was 4 years old, when her daughter needed words and when her daughter needed silence. The knock came at 9:04. Lila crossed the living room. She smoothed the front of her sweater. She opened the door. Adrian was standing on the porch in a dark wool coat with the collar turned up and no tie and no driver visible behind him. He had a small bakery box in one hand, tied with baker's twine. His hair was still a little damp. He looked, in the pale November morning light, like a completely different man from the one who had stood in the Carrington ballroom. Smaller, somehow. Less of a weather system. Just a man. A tall, tired man at her door with a box of pastries. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning? May I come in?" "Yes, come in." He stepped past her into the hall. He smelled like clean soap and cold air. In the kitchen, Catalina rose from her chair and nodded at him. A small, precise nod. The nod of a woman who had met him many times and respected him and was not in any way afraid of him. And Adrian returned it and handed her the bakery box. "For Mrs. Hart," he said. "The almond ones. Tell her I remembered." "Adrian." Catalina's mouth did something that in another face would have been a smile. "You are a thoughtful boy." "I try." "You do not try enough." Also true. Eleanor on the couch had pushed herself up a little and was watching the exchange with the sharp, amused eyes of a woman who had not been fooled by a man in 30 years and did not intend to start today. Adrian crossed to her. He did not reach for her hand. He did not do any of the performed things that men did in movies when meeting a mother. He simply stood at a respectful distance and he inclined his head. "Mrs. Hart, I'm Adrian Moretti. I'm very glad to see you looking better this morning." "Mr. Moretti." Eleanor's voice was thin but steady. She looked him up and down once, the way a woman evaluates the man who has walked into her living room with her daughter's name on his face. "I understand I have you to thank for a doctor and a nurse, and, from what my daughter tells me, approximately half of the armed men of the greater Washington metropolitan area." "Mom, what?" "He's standing right there. He knows what he did." Adrian actually smiled. It was the second smile Lila had seen from him, and like the first one, it did something unfair to his face. "Mrs. Hart, anything I arranged last night was long overdue. Your daughter is a remarkable young woman, and she has been carrying something that should not have been hers alone to carry. I'm glad I was in a position to help." Eleanor watched him. "You talk very well." I've had practice. I'll bet you have. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Catalina made coffee. My daughter has not eaten. You two are going to sit in my kitchen and you are going to have a real conversation about whatever it is you came here to say, and I am going to pretend very hard that I cannot hear a single word because my ears, Mr. Moretti, are not what they used to be. Understood. Good boy. She lay back against the pillows. She picked up her crossword. Lila, standing in the doorway between the living room and the kitchen, had the distinct sense that her mother had just performed some kind of ancient evaluation on Adrian Moretti and had chosen, for her own reasons, not to disqualify him yet. In the kitchen, Lila poured 2 mugs with hands that she was pretending did not shake. She set them on the old round table. Adrian hung his coat on the back of a chair and sat. The chair, which had been her father's, creaked a little under him. The morning sun came through the window over the sink and fell in a long golden bar across the table. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He was looking at her hands on the mug. She was looking at the steam rising off the coffee. I told you last night, Adrian said quietly, that I was going to come here today and tell you who I am. Yes? I'm going to do that now. I'm not going to make it sound nicer than it is. I'd rather you hear the real version from me than a polished version from somebody else. Okay. He wrapped both hands around the mug. His hands were large and very still. There was a thin white scar along the edge of his left thumb that she had not noticed last night. My family came from a town in Calabria in 1922, he said. My great-grandfather, he had 3 brothers. Between them, over about 40 years, they built something in this country that other people gave a name to. I won't use the name. Names don't matter. What matters is that by the time I was born, the thing they had built was large, and it was old, and it had rules. What kind of thing? Construction unions, waste management contracts, transportation, a piece of the harbor in Baltimore, and a larger piece of a harbor farther south. For a long time, certain things that moved through those harbors were not what the paperwork said they were. That is less true now than it was 10 years ago. It is still true enough. Lila's hand tightened on her mug. And you run this? I run a significant part of it, yes. My father died when I was 26. I was the only son. My uncle, the one I mentioned last night, wanted to run it himself. There was a conversation. At the end of the conversation, I ran it, and he ran a smaller piece of it, and we have been, more or less, in agreement ever since. More or less. What does more or less mean? It means there are still nights when he calls me and tells me I am making a woman a target by standing on her porch. Lila was quiet for a long moment. Have you hurt people? She said. Adrian did not look away. That was the thing she would remember later. He did not look away, and he did not flinch, and he did not try to shape the answer into something softer than it was. Yes. Killed people. I have made decisions that led to people dying. I have twice, a long time ago, done it myself. I have not done it myself in 14 years. That is not because I became a better man. It is because I became a more important one, and a more important man does not do his own hands' work. I want you to understand that distinction, Lila. I don't want you to think I am standing in your kitchen telling you I am clean. I am not clean. She stared at the steam rising off the coffee. She had thought, on the drive to her mother's house last night, that she already understood who he was. She had understood, in the theoretical way a person understands an earthquake they have only seen on television. Hearing him say it like this, plainly, at her kitchen table, in the morning light, was different. Her hands were shaking. She set the mug down so he would not see. Then why are you here? She said. Because I told you last night I would come. Because you deserve to hear this from me before you hear it from anyone else. And because if you tell me, in the next 10 minutes, that you never want to see me again, I will respect that, and I will make sure that my uncle and everyone who answers to him knows that you are not part of my life, and your family will be left alone. You will go back to the life you had before last night. My life before last night was my mother dying on a generic protocol because I couldn't afford the real one. Adrian was quiet. I know, he said. Did you know that when you called the doctor? I guessed. Did you pay for the drug she was on before? I will. That's not what I asked. I will pay for whatever she needs, for as long as she needs it, whether or not you ever see me again. That is not a condition of anything, Lila. I want you to understand that. If you tell me to leave this house in 10 minutes, Dr. Rice will still be on call. Catalina will still be here. Your mother will get the real protocol starting Monday. You will not owe me anything for it. That isn't how this works. Then how does it work? It works like this. He turned the mug in his hands, a slow quarter turn, and looked down at it as if the words were written on the ceramic. I am 41 years old. I have spent 20 years doing a job I was raised from the age of 9 to do. I am very good at it. I am less good than I used to be at telling myself that the cost of being good at it is worth it. For the last few years, I have been, quietly, carefully, without anyone in my family noticing, moving pieces of what we do into businesses that would survive in sunlight. I have been trying to turn a thing my great-grandfather built in the dark into a thing my daughter, if I ever had one, could inherit in the light. I have not told anyone this. Not my uncle, not the men who work for me, not the women I have occasionally and briefly allowed into my life. Why are you telling me? Because when I saw you last night with that tray, I saw the first person in a very long time who I did not immediately know how to place. You weren't afraid of me the way people in my world are afraid of me. You weren't drawn to me the way people outside my world are drawn to me. You were just present, a person in a room, carrying champagne, crying about her mother. And you looked at me like I was another person in the room. That was all. And it was the strangest experience I have had in 15 years. Lila did not know what to do with her face. She could feel tears in it, and she did not want them to fall because she did not yet know what they were for. Adrian, I'm a waitress. I'm aware. I dropped out of school. I have $900 in a checking account. I don't own anything. I don't know anything about your world. I don't even know which fork to use at the kind of dinners you probably... Lila. What? I don't care which fork you use. Everyone in your life will care which fork I use. Yes, they will. That is a real thing. I am not going to tell you it isn't. She wiped her cheek with the heel of her hand. He watched her do it, and he did not reach across the table, and he did not say anything. And that restraint, that small, careful restraint, did something to her chest that was worse than if he had tried to touch her. Last night, she said, on the porch, you said your uncle told you I was a target. Yes. A target of what? Exactly. Don't give me the polite version. Adrian let out a long, slow breath. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. There are 3 families in this part of the country, he said, that have a relationship with mine that could charitably be called a ceasefire. One of them is, at the moment, looking for a reason to stop being at peace with us. A weakness, an embarrassment, a distraction. If they find out, and they will find out, because my uncle is not the only person who hears things, that I have attached myself publicly to a young woman with no protection and a sick mother, they will see that as an opportunity. They will not probably hurt you. They are not in the business of hurting women for sport. But they will try to use you, approach you, follow you, offer your mother things, try to turn you, gently, into a source of information about me. If that doesn't work, they will try less gentle things. Do you understand? Yes. There is also a branch of my own family that will not like this. My uncle can be managed. My cousin Vittorio is another matter. He has always believed that the next leader of our family should be him. If he decides that my attachment to you is evidence that I am unfit to lead, he will make a move. He will not make the move directly against you. He will make it against me, and you will be used as the explanation for why it was necessary. Adrian, I know how this sounds. Do you? He finally looked up from the mug. His eyes, in the kitchen light, were the color of strong tea. There was something in them that she recognized suddenly, with a small shock. Loneliness. A long, weathered, professional loneliness. The kind that a person wears like a coat for so long they forget they have it on. Yes, he said. I know how it sounds. It sounds like I am sitting in your kitchen on a Saturday morning with a box of almond pastries telling you that standing next to me could get you killed, and asking you to stand next to me anyway. Is that what you're asking? No. Then what? I'm asking you, he said, carefully, whether you want to see me again, not as someone who owes me, not as a woman whose mother I saved, as a person who met another person in a ballroom. That's all I'm asking right now. Whether we sit across from each other again in a week and eat a meal and talk like 2 people. If the answer is no, I leave this house and I never come back, and your family is cared for anyway. If the answer is yes, then we will have many more conversations like this one, and each of them will be harder than the last. That is the honest version. Lila looked at her hands. They were still shaking, a little, but less. Her mother, in the living room, was rustling the pages of the crossword in a way that was transparently fake. She thought about her mother on the kitchen floor in August with the coffee mug broken beside her. She thought about her mother on the couch last night with an IV in her arm and her hand on the back of Lila's head. She thought about Adrian in the Carrington kitchen, turning to Margaret and saying, "I'd consider it a personal favor," and the way Margaret had straightened up like a soldier being addressed by a general. She thought about the scar on his thumb. "Yes," she said. Adrian's hands went very still on the mug. "Yes? Yes. I want to see you again. I don't know what that means. I don't know what I'm saying yes to, but I don't want you to walk out of my mother's house and never come back. I'd regret that for the rest of my life, and I already have enough things I regret." He nodded, slowly, once. "All right," he said. "All right. Thursday," he said. "I'll send a car, somewhere quiet. Not a restaurant anyone would know me at. I'll text you the address. Catalina will stay with your mother. Okay? And Lila." "Yes. From this moment until this is done, there will be a car at the end of the street at all times. There will be a man in a coffee shop across from wherever you work. There will be someone on your phone, quietly. You will not see them. They will see everything. I don't want you to feel watched. I want you to feel protected. There is a difference, and I hope, over time, you come to feel it. Okay? If at any point you want them gone, you tell me. They're gone. This is not a cage. Okay?" He rose. He took his coat off the back of the chair. He paused, one hand on the wood. "Thank you for the coffee," he said. "Thank you for my mother," she said. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he crossed the kitchen, slowly, and he stopped in front of her chair, and he did not touch her. He simply stood there for one breath, close enough that she could see the faint gray in the stubble along his jaw that he had shaved over and missed. "Lila Hart," he said quietly, as if he were saying it to himself. Then he turned and he crossed the living room and he stopped by the couch to say goodbye to Eleanor, who told him to drive safely and not let Catalina bully him about the pastries, and then he was gone. And the front door closed with a soft click, and Lila was standing in her mother's kitchen alone with 2 cooling mugs and a bar of yellow sunlight in her own thudding heart. In the living room, Eleanor said, without looking up from her crossword, "Come sit down, honey. You look like you're about to faint." "Mom, come sit." Lila came and sat on the edge of the couch. Eleanor put the crossword aside. She took her daughter's hand in both of hers. Her hands were cool and thin and still too light, but they were her mother's hands, and Lila closed her eyes and let the weight of them anchor her. "I heard all of it," Eleanor said quietly. "I know you did. He's not good for you. I know. He might be the best thing that ever happened to you. I know. Both those things can be true at the same time, honey. That's the trick with men like that. That's the trick with lives like that." "Mom, what do I do?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Her thumb traced a small circle on the back of Lila's hand. Outside, a car passed slowly on the street, and then another, and then a third. "I'll tell you what I think," Eleanor said at last, "and then I'll shut up. Because you're a grown woman and this is not my decision. I think that man walked in here this morning because he has been alone for a long time, and he saw something in you that he had stopped believing existed, and he is frightened, because men like that are not used to being frightened by soft things. And I think you looked at him last night, and you saw a person underneath all that money and that danger, and you saw that he was tired. Were you tired too, honey? Were you so tired last night?" "Yes, I know. I know you were. And that's the dangerous part. 2 tired people finding each other in a room. That's not a small thing, Lila. That's the kind of thing that will either save you both or destroy you both. There is no middle lane in what you're walking into. I want you to understand that before you take another step." "I'm scared." "Good. You should be." Lila let her head rest against her mother's shoulder. Eleanor turned her face into her daughter's hair and breathed in, the way she used to breathe in when Lila was a little girl, and for a moment Lila was 6 again, and there had been a nightmare, and she had crawled into her mother's bed, and the world had been small and fixable. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. They sat like that for a long time, while Catalina moved quietly in the kitchen and the sun tracked its slow bar across the living room floor. And outside, at the end of the street, a dark gray sedan sat with its engine running and its two occupants pretending to read the newspaper. Thursday came slowly. Thursday came too fast. Lila did not know which. She went to her diner shift on Sunday. She tried to tell herself that nothing had changed. She was wrong. Everything had changed. She noticed on Sunday afternoon that the parking lot outside the diner contained the same blue truck that had been parked across from her apartment building on Sunday morning. She noticed on Monday that when she rode the metro to her second job at a coffee shop in Rosslyn, there was a woman in a tan coat 3 seats down who was not reading the book she was holding. She noticed on Tuesday that when she walked home at 10 p.m. from her third job, a night cleaning shift at a dentist's office, the one she had not yet been able to afford to quit, there were 2 men standing by a parked car at the corner, smoking, not speaking, watching her walk past without ever once looking at her directly. They nodded as she went by, just a small professional nod. She did not see them as a cage. She saw them as something else, and that was the thing that frightened her. Because she had lived her whole life feeling the low, constant background hum of being a woman alone in a city, and for the first time in her memory, that hum had gone quiet. She was not alone on the sidewalks. She was not alone in the parking lot. She was not alone anywhere. And she was not sure what it said about her that she liked it. On Wednesday night, she called Adrian. The number he had given her rang once. He picked up. Lila. Hi. Is something wrong? No, nothing is wrong. Can I ask you something? Anything. The men, at the corner, the woman on the train. Yes. Is this what it's always going to be like? For a while, yes, until some things are settled, until certain people in my life are convinced that you are not a weakness they can use against me. And after that, less visible. Not gone, less visible. Okay. Lila. Yes. You don't sound okay. She stood at her kitchen window. Her apartment was a 1-bedroom over a dry cleaner's in Arlington, and the window looked down on an alley where a stray orange cat had, for the last 2 years, come by every Wednesday night for the scraps she set out. The cat was there now, eating something she had put down before her shift. The cat did not know the world had changed. I'm scared of how not scared I am, she said. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Say that again, he said softly. I'm scared of how not scared I am. When I thought about it, about what you said Saturday, about the Target thing, about the cars and the men I thought I would be terrified all week. I thought I would be sleeping with the lights on. I'm not. I'm sleeping better than I've slept in months. I know somebody is watching my door. I know if I scream, 5 men show up in 90 seconds. And Adrian, that is doing something to me that I don't understand. Because that's not a normal thing to feel good about. That's a sign that something is wrong with me, isn't it? No. Yes, it is. No, Lila. Listen to me. You are a 26-year-old woman who has been carrying the weight of her dying mother alone for 3 months. You have worked 3 jobs. You have not slept. You have watched every dollar. For the first time since August, someone else is standing at the edge of your life with their shoulder against the wall that has been falling on you. That is not sickness. That is relief. You are allowed to feel relief. I don't want to need it. I know. I don't want to be the kind of woman who, I know. Adrian. Yes. What if I fall in love with you for the wrong reasons? The silence on the line was long. She could hear faintly the sound of a clock. His office. She remembered from a line in the newspaper she had looked him up in on Sunday morning that he kept an office in a glass tower in Rosslyn that his family had owned through a holding company for 19 years. Lila, he said finally, I have spent my whole life being cared about for the wrong reasons. Men have respected me for the wrong reasons. Women have wanted me for the wrong reasons. My uncle loves me for the wrong reasons. I am not going to lose sleep over the possibility that a waitress who saw me for 12 seconds across a ballroom and hasn't asked me for a single thing since might eventually love me for a slightly imperfect mix of the right ones and the wrong ones. That is not a problem I have. Do you understand? Yes, tomorrow. Tomorrow. Wear whatever you want, 7 o'clock. My driver's name is Marco. You met him on Friday. He'll come to your door. Please don't make him wait in the car. It's going to be cold. Okay. Lila. Yes? I'm glad you called. She hung up. She stood at the window for a long time. The orange cat finished its scraps and looked up at her once, with its pale gold eyes, and then it disappeared into the alley the way it always did. The next evening, at 6:57 p.m., there was a soft knock at the door. Marco. Dark coat, dark hat, face like a man who had been a boxer 20 years ago and had stopped at exactly the right moment. He did not speak much. He held doors. He drove carefully. She sat in the back of the black car with her hands folded in her lap, in a navy dress she had owned for 4 years and had last worn to a cousin's wedding, and she watched Washington go by the window in a long ribbon of lights. Adrian was waiting in a small, upstairs room above a restaurant in Georgetown. The restaurant was unmarked on the outside. Lila would never, in her whole life after, be able to find it again on a map. There were 4 tables in the room. 3 were empty. Adrian stood when she came in. He was wearing a dark navy sweater over a white shirt, no tie, and for a strange second Lila did not recognize him, because he looked for the first time like a private person and not a public one. "You came," he said. "Was I not going to?" I told myself not to assume. A waiter, an older man, gray at the temples, who greeted Adrian with the quiet warmth of someone who had known him since he was a boy, brought bread and a bottle of water and disappeared. Adrian pulled out her chair. She sat. He sat across from her. The candle on the table threw a small, warm circle of light across the white cloth and the silver and the curve of her wrist. They did not talk about the Mafia. They did not talk about targets or uncles or cousins named Vittorio. They talked for 2 hours about the things that 2 people talk about when they are trying to figure out who the other one is underneath the story of their lives. Her father, who had been a middle school history teacher and had died of a heart attack at 49. His mother, who had died when he was 6, and whose face he could barely remember, and whose voice he could not remember at all. The book she had read 3 times in college and could never explain why. The horse he had owned as a boy and sold at 17 because he was going into the family business, and there was no longer room in his life for a horse. The way she made her coffee. The way he did not, because he drank only espresso, and not much of it, because his doctor had told him at 36 that his heart was going to kill him before his enemies did if he did not change several things about his life. "Did you change them?" she asked. "Some of them." "Which ones?" "I stopped drinking whiskey every night. I started walking. I bought a house in Virginia that nobody from my family has ever been to because I wanted a room somewhere in the world where no one could reach me. I have not told anyone about that house. I am telling you because it seemed relevant." "Why?" "Because I would like eventually to take you there. Not soon, but eventually, if you wanted to go." Lila looked at her plate. Her throat had gone tight. She nodded once without trusting her voice. Adrian saw it. He did not push. He picked up his water and he changed the subject gently to the orange cat in her alley, and she laughed wetly. And she told him the cat's name was Howard, because the first time she had seen him, he had been sitting on a copy of the Washington Post that somebody had left in the alley, and she had thought he looked like a Howard. And Adrian laughed. A real laugh, quiet and surprised. And for the rest of the evening they were, in a way that neither of them had quite been with anyone in a long time, simply 2 people in a room. At the end of the night, Marco drove her home. Adrian did not come with her. She had expected in some small part of herself that he would try to. He did not. He walked her to the car. He opened her door himself. He stood on the curb as the car pulled away, and he raised one hand in a small, still gesture, and he was still standing there when the car turned the corner and she lost sight of him. She did not sleep that night for a different reason than the one she had not slept for on Friday night. She lay in bed with the ceiling fan ticking and the orange light of the street lamp coming through the blinds, and she thought, "Oh no." She thought, "Oh no, oh no, oh no." She thought very clearly, almost calmly, "I am in very serious trouble." She thought, and this was the thing that stayed with her, the thing she turned over and over in her mind as the hours slid from 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. "He has not touched me. Not once. Not his hand on my hand, not his fingers on my cheek, not a kiss on the forehead. Nothing. He has sat across from me in 3 rooms, and he has not once reached across the table, and he is the most physically present man I have ever been in a room with in my life. And I am in very serious trouble. Somewhere in the city, 32 miles from her bed, in the glass tower he owned through 4 shell companies, Adrian Moretti stood at his window and looked down at a Washington he had been trying for 8 years to slowly and carefully change from underneath without anyone noticing. And he thought, for the first time with anything like fear, she is going to love me back. He had prepared for most of his adult life for many things: war, betrayal, prison, the knife in the dark, the call at 3 a.m. He had not somehow prepared for this. He stood at the window a long time. Somewhere in his building, a door closed. Somewhere in the city, a siren faded. He pressed his forehead lightly against the cold glass, and he allowed himself for the length of one slow breath to close his eyes. Then he turned from the window and he went back to his desk, and he picked up the phone because his uncle was calling, and his uncle at this hour did not call about small things. And Adrian Moretti's week, which had been, by his standards, unusually quiet, was about to become something else entirely. The call that night lasted 11 minutes. Adrian took it standing at his desk because his uncle had once told him, many years ago, that a man who sat down for bad news had already lost half the argument, and Adrian had never forgotten it. Adrian. Zio. Are you alone? Yes. Good. I want you to listen to me. I am not going to raise my voice tonight. I am not going to threaten you. I am going to speak to you as the brother of your father, who loved you, and who is not here to tell you what I am about to tell you. I'm listening. A meeting has been called for Sunday, at the house on Chesapeake. Not by me, by Vittorio. He has the votes for it, 5 of the 9. Benedetto, Carmine, Ricci, Santino, and, I am sorry, Adrian, your cousin Renata. Adrian closed his eyes. Renata signed, okay? The subject of the meeting, as written on the paper that was hand-delivered to me 2 hours ago, is the continued fitness of the current head of the family to lead in accordance with our traditions. That is the language. Those are the words. I see. You understand what this means? Yes. Adrian, I'm going to ask you one thing, and I'm going to ask it only once. And whatever you answer, we will proceed from there. Is the girl worth this? Adrian stood very still at his desk. Through the glass wall of his office, he could see the whole of Arlington, the Potomac, a dark seam stitching it to Washington. And somewhere over there, in a one-bedroom over a dry cleaner's in a building she had lived in for 4 years, a woman named Lila Hart was lying in a bed staring at a ceiling fan. He did not know she was doing this, but he could feel her somehow, the way a man in a storm can feel the lee side of a wall he has not yet found. I don't know yet, he said. Don't lie to me. I'm not. Zio, listen to me. I met her 6 days ago. I have had 2 conversations and 1 meal with her. If I told you yes, she's worth this, you would know I was lying, and you would lose faith in me. I'm telling you the truth. I don't know yet. I know what she might be worth. I know what it already feels like to consider walking away. And I know that if I let Vittorio push me into walking away on Sunday, I will never know what she was worth, and that will be the end of something in me that I have been trying to protect for a long time. His uncle was silent for a long moment. That is the most honest thing you have said to me in 11 years. Thank you. It does not help me. I know. Sunday is going to be very bad, Adrian. I know. Vittorio is not coming to the table to win a vote. He has the vote. He is coming to make a show. He wants the girl in the room. Adrian's hand tightened on the edge of the desk. No. He will demand it. He does not get to demand anything of her. Adrian, listen to me. If you refuse to bring her, he will say you are hiding her because you know she cannot stand in front of us. He will say you are embarrassed of her. He will say she is a secret. And those are the words that will go into the room if you leave her out of it. Do you understand what those words will build? I understand. If you bring her and she stands, even for 1 minute, and does not weep and does not apologize and does not fold, then he has nothing. Then the story becomes something else. Then the story becomes Adrian brought a woman into our house and she did not flinch. Zio. She has been working 3 jobs for 3 months to keep her mother alive. She has not eaten a full dinner in a week. She is 5'6". She has never been in a room with men like Vittorio and Benedetto and Ricci in her life. Then you will have to decide, Adrian, whether you trust her with what she is. Adrian did not answer for a long time. Through the glass, he watched a single helicopter tracking slowly north along the river, its red light blinking, and he thought about Lila's hand on the coffee mug that morning, not quite steady, and about the way she had said yes at her mother's kitchen table without looking away. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said. "Adrian?" "Yes, I hope she is real. I hope for all our sakes that she is real. Because if she is not, this will be the thing that breaks you, and I will not be able to protect you from it. And if she is real—" His uncle paused, his voice softened by one shade. "If she is real, I will stand behind her on Sunday. I want you to know that. You are my brother's son. Whatever you put in that room, I will stand behind. But you have to be certain, Adrian, not hopeful, certain." "I understand. Good night, Nipote." "Good night." He hung up. He stood at the desk with his hand still on the receiver for almost a full minute. Then he crossed his office and he poured himself 2 fingers of the bourbon his doctor had told him not to drink. He drank it in one slow swallow. He set the glass down. And he did what he had told himself before he picked up the phone tonight that he would not do. He called her. It was 2:14 a.m. Lila's phone on the nightstand in her apartment in Arlington lit up in the dark. She was not asleep. She had been lying there for hours. She picked up on the second ring. "Adrian, did I wake you?" "No." "Good." There was a pause. She could hear through the line the soft sound of a city office at night, the hum of a heating system, the distant tick of something she could not place. "I have to ask you to do something," he said. "And I want you to say no if you need to say no. I want you to know that no is a real answer. I'm going to give you all the information first, and then I'm going to ask you the question, and you are going to take as long as you need to answer. Okay?" "Okay." He told her about the meeting, about Vittorio, about Chesapeake, about what it would mean if she came, about what it would mean if she did not. He did not soften any of it. He did not try to make it smaller than it was. He told her there was a real and serious chance that the meeting would end with her in a room with 9 of the most dangerous people on the eastern seaboard, and that one of those 9 had already decided before she walked through the door that she was the reason he was going to take the chair his cousin had been sitting in for 15 years. Lila listened. She did not interrupt. She lay in the dark with the phone pressed so hard to her ear that it hurt, and she listened. When he was done, she was quiet for a long time. "Adrian." "Yes." "Can I ask you something first?" "Anything." "If I don't come, if I say no, what happens on Sunday?" "Vittorio says I am hiding you. He uses that to say I am no longer capable of leading. He does not have the votes to remove me outright, even with 5 of 9, because there are rules about how this is done that I am not going to explain to you on the phone at 2 in the morning. But he will have damaged me enough that the next time he comes for me, he will have 7, maybe 8. And if he gets 8, then I will no longer be the head of the family. Do you go to jail?" "No." "Do you die?" Adrian was quiet. "I do not know. Probably not. Almost certainly not. Vittorio is not my cousin Renata, who I loved, who signed a paper tonight that I will have to live with for the rest of my life. He is a different kind of man. The kind of man who, when he takes over, might consider that I know too much to be walking around comfortable. But that is the worst case. In the likely case, I lose the job. I lose most of what I have been building quietly for 8 years, and I spend the next 10 years of my life being very, very careful about the doors I walk through. That's the likely case. And if you come and you stand, even for 5 minutes, even if you say nothing, then Vittorio's entire argument collapses. The story changes. He loses his votes, not all of them, but enough of them, and the meeting ends with me still in the chair and him with a very expensive lesson about public challenges. And after that, Lila, things will be calmer. Not safe, but calmer. Long enough for me to do what I have been trying to do. Long enough, maybe, for there to be a version of my life in which you can sit across from me in my kitchen on a Sunday morning and we can argue about what to have for breakfast." She was crying, quietly, without sound, a wet line down her temple into her hair. "Adrian." "Yes." If I come, and I stand, and I survive Sunday, what happens to me after? What do you mean? I mean, I was a waitress 6 days ago. I have an apartment over a dry cleaner's. My mother is sick. My sister-in-law is a kindergarten teacher in Pittsburgh, and I have not told her any of this. If I walk into that room, Adrian, if I walk into that room and your cousin Vittorio sees my face, I do not get to go back to being a waitress, do I? I do not get to go back to the diner on Clarendon Boulevard and the copy shop in Rosslyn and the cleaning shift at the dentist's office, do I? Not after Sunday. Whatever happens in that room, I am not the person I was on Friday night. Ever again. Am I? Adrian's voice, when he answered, had something raw in it that she had not heard before. No, he said. You are not. Okay. Lila, no, hold on, let me finish. I'm not saying no, I need to say this out loud so that I hear myself say it, because if I don't, I'm going to say yes to you out of guilt or out of whatever this is I feel about you that I am not going to try to name at 2 a.m. And if I say yes for those reasons, I'm going to get into that room and I'm going to fold the first time somebody looks at me wrong, because I will not know why I am there. So I need to know why I am there. Do you understand? Yes. Okay? So, my mother. If I come on Sunday and something goes wrong and I'm not there anymore, what happens to her? She is taken care of for the rest of her life. By me. By my lawyer. By a trust that would be set up Monday morning regardless of what happens Sunday. That is not a condition. That is a fact. I would like you to understand that it has already been done. I set it up on Wednesday. Wednesday. Yes. Before I said yes to dinner. Yes. Adrian. I know. Okay. A long, shaky breath. Okay. Second thing, my name. My actual name. If I come Sunday, is there a version of this where Vittorio leaves that room and a week later my name is in a newspaper? No, not a newspaper. But somewhere, in certain rooms that no one outside of those rooms will ever hear about, yes, your name will be known. That is part of what I am asking you to accept. Okay, Lila. I'm thinking. Okay. She lay in the dark for a long time. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ear against the phone. She could hear, very faintly, the refrigerator cycling in the kitchen. She could hear, somewhere outside, a man's cough, which was probably one of Adrian's men at the corner, which was, she realized, the sound of her life now, whether she went to Chesapeake on Sunday or not. Adrian, she said. Yes. I want to ask you one more question, and I want you to answer it honestly. Okay. Do you love me? The silence on the line was the longest silence of her life. Yes, he said. Since when? Since you told me your cat was named Howard. In spite of herself, in spite of everything, Lila let out a wet, surprised half-laugh. A single broken sound in the dark. That was 4 days ago. Yes. Adrian, that's not possible. You can't love somebody in 4 days. Lila, I have been alone for a very long time. I have been in a great many rooms with a great many women who were prettier and better educated and better connected than you will ever be. None of them, not one of them, in 20 years, made me laugh at a story about a stray cat. I'm not telling you I love you because I have thought about it carefully and weighed the evidence. I am telling you I love you because tonight when my uncle asked me if you were worth this, I did not know the answer, and that terrified me. A person who terrifies me by being uncertain is a person I love. That is how I know. Achabokal. She could not speak. She pressed her hand to her mouth. And I am not asking you, he went on softly, to say it back. I am not asking you anything, Lila. I am telling you because you asked, and because if something goes wrong on Sunday and I did not tell you, I would carry that with me into whatever comes next. So, now you know. And you can decide about Sunday on whatever information you need without wondering what this is between us because I have just told you what it is. From my side, that's all. She nodded in the dark, even though he could not see her. Okay, she whispered. Okay. I'll come. Lila. I said I'll come. Take the night. Tell me tomorrow. No, I'll tell you now. I'll come. On Sunday. I'll come with you to Chesapeake. I'll stand in that room. I won't fold. I'll try not to fold. I can't promise. But I won't do it on purpose. And if I survive Sunday, her voice caught. If I survive Sunday, Adrian, then we are going to have a long conversation on Monday about what my life is now. And you are going to tell me everything, not the polite version, everything. Do we have a deal? Yes. Okay. Lila. Yes. Thank you. Don't. Don't thank me. Not for this. Just go to sleep. Please go to sleep. You sound like a man who hasn't slept in a week. I haven't. Then go to sleep. Okay. Good night, Adrian. Good night. She hung up. She set the phone face down on the nightstand. She stared at the ceiling fan turning in the dark. At some point, near dawn, she fell asleep without remembering doing it, and when she woke at 9 a.m. on Friday morning, she sat up in bed and she realized, with a slow and unfamiliar calm, that she had made a decision she did not regret. Friday and Saturday passed like somebody else's weekend. Catalina came each morning. Eleanor held her daughter's hand and did not ask questions, because Lila had told her very simply on Friday afternoon that she was going somewhere with Adrian on Sunday that was important, and that she would be home Sunday night, and that she loved her mother very much. And Eleanor Hart, who had buried a husband and watched her daughter drop out of college and lain on a couch with an IV in her arm 6 days ago, had simply nodded and squeezed her hand and said, "You come home to me, baby. You come home." On Saturday afternoon, a woman Lila had never met arrived at her apartment with 3 garment bags and a steamer. Her name was Isabella. She was Portuguese, sharp-eyed, and in her 50s. She worked, she said, for a private tailor in Alexandria that had served Adrian's family for 31 years. She did not ask Lila any questions, except her measurements. She pulled out a dress. Simple, elegant, the color of dry winter wheat, with long sleeves and a high neck and a skirt that fell just below the knee. And she held it up against Lila and she nodded, once to herself. "This one," she said, "not black, not red, not anything that looks like it is trying. You will walk into that house tomorrow like you were born in it. Do you understand, querida?" "I don't think I understand anything anymore." "Good. Then you will do fine. The ones who think they understand are the ones who fall." Isabella stayed for 2 hours. She pinned the dress at the waist. She selected, from a second bag, a pair of low pumps that Lila could actually walk in, and a small thin gold chain that had been her own grandmother's, she said, and that she wanted Lila to borrow for the day. She showed Lila how to sit, how to cross her ankles, how to hold her hands in her lap, how to look a man in the eye across a table without blinking first. "You do not have to speak, querida. They will expect you to speak. They are going to try to make you speak. You do not have to. Silence in that room is a weapon. The first person who speaks has given something away. Adrian will speak. Vittorio will speak. Let them. You just..." She tapped her own chin, once, gently. "You sit. You breathe. You look at whoever is speaking. And when it is time, if it is time, Adrian will tell you. Okay? Okay? One more thing. Yes. If a man in that room at any point tries to make you cry, and one of them will try, this is guaranteed, you do not cry. You do not apologize. You do not look at Adrian for help. You look at the man who is trying to make you cry, and you remember that 3 months ago you were working 3 jobs for a dying mother, and you ask yourself whether this man has any idea what a real hard thing looks like. Because he does not, querida. None of them do. They have spent their lives being afraid of each other. You have spent your life being afraid of an empty refrigerator. You are harder than they are. You do not know it yet. But you are." Isabella left at sunset. The dress hung on the back of Lila's bedroom door like a small, quiet promise. Lila sat on the edge of her bed and looked at it for a long time. Then she got up. She made herself a sandwich. She ate the whole thing. She called her mother and she talked about nothing important for 45 minutes. She went to bed at 10 and she slept surprisingly, like somebody had turned off a switch. Sunday morning was cold and very clear. The sky over Arlington was the pale, thin blue of late November, and the trees along the river had lost almost all their leaves. Marco came at 9:30. He drove her to a private garage in Alexandria where Adrian was waiting beside a larger car, a dark gray Mercedes with tinted windows, flanked by 2 men she did not recognize. Adrian was wearing a charcoal suit and a white shirt, no tie. He had not slept. She could see it in his face. He saw her and something moved in his jaw, once and then smoothed out. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "Isabella picked it." "I know. She called me last night. She said I did not deserve you. I agreed with her." He opened the car door. She got in. He got in after her. The car pulled out of the garage and onto the parkway and began the long drive east, toward the water, toward Chesapeake, toward a house on the bay that had been in his family for 91 years. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Adrian held her hand on the seat between them. His hand was warm, dry, steady. She looked out the window at the brown fields and the bare black trees going past, and she tried to keep her breathing even. At some point, she turned her head and she watched his profile for a long minute. The line of his jaw, the small scar at the edge of his lip she had not noticed before, the small tired movement of the muscle in his temple. And she thought, very simply, "I am going into a room today to stand next to this man. That is what I am doing. That is the shape of today. Everything else is noise." It steadied her. The house on Chesapeake was not a mansion. That surprised her. She had expected columns, marble, a security gate with cameras. It was a large, old stone farmhouse on 40 acres of sloping land that ran down to the bay, with a barn and a chapel and a grove of winter-bare oak trees that had been planted, Adrian murmured to her as they came up the drive in 1937. There were cars parked in a loose semicircle on the gravel. 3 black SUVs, 2 sedans, a Lincoln Town Car that had to be 40 years old. Men in dark coats stood at various casual-looking positions around the property. They all nodded to Adrian as the Mercedes pulled up. They did not look at Lila. Adrian's uncle met them on the porch. He was smaller than Lila had imagined, and older, 70, perhaps, with white hair and a heavy gold ring on his right hand and eyes the color of a cold ocean. He took Lila's hand in both of his, briefly, and he studied her face without embarrassment. "Miss Hart," he said. His voice was soft and low, a faint Italian accent, worn almost smooth by 60 years in this country. "I am Salvatore Moretti. I have heard a great deal about you in a very short time. Mr. Moretti, you understand what is going to happen inside?" "Yes, sir." "You are not required to speak today. Adrian will speak. I will speak. Vittorio will speak very much. You are not required to say anything at all. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir. I understand." "Good." He held her eyes for one long moment, and then, very softly, almost to himself, "Ah, good. Yes, you will do." He turned and led them into the house. The front room was a long, low hall with dark wooden beams and a great stone fireplace at one end. A long oak table ran down the center of it. 8 men and 1 woman were seated around it. The woman, in her mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back, met Lila's eyes once across the room. Renata, Lila understood without being told, the cousin who had signed the paper, and looked down quickly, her jaw tight. Vittorio was at the far end of the table. He was a big man. Broad shoulders, a heavy gold watch, a thick neck, a face that had been handsome once and was now settling into something harder and redder. He did not rise when Adrian and Lila came in. He leaned back in his chair, and he watched them cross the room with the slow, deliberate pleasure of a man who had been waiting a very long time for this morning. Adrian walked Lila to a chair at his own end of the table. He pulled it out for her. She sat. He sat beside her. Salvatore sat at Adrian's other side. The chair beside Vittorio, at the far end, was empty, except for a stack of papers. "We will begin," Salvatore said. Vittorio smiled. "Cousin," he said, and his voice was warm, almost friendly, which made the hair on the back of Lila's neck rise. "Thank you for coming, and thank you, Miss... I am sorry, I do not know your family name." "Hart," Adrian said. "Hart. Thank you, Miss Hart, for coming into our home. We are honored." "She is here as my guest," Adrian said. "She will not be addressed directly unless she chooses to speak." "Of course. Of course. Only, I am curious, cousin. Perhaps you can answer for her. Miss Hart, what is it you do for a living?" "Vittorio." "It is a reasonable question, cousin. The room is curious. She has been much discussed." "Vittorio, she is my guest." "I am a waitress," Lila said. The whole table went still. She had not meant to say it. Or she had. She could not tell. Isabella's voice was somewhere in the back of her head saying silence in that room is a weapon, and she had just, quite deliberately, laid the weapon down. But she had looked at Vittorio's face, and she had seen the small, quick flicker of triumph in it at the idea that he was going to pull this answer out of Adrian like a dentist pulling a tooth in front of the whole room, and something in her had said no. No, I will not give him that. I will give him nothing that is not mine to give. A waitress, Vittorio said. He let the words sit. Yes. At what establishment, if I may? I'm between jobs this week. Last week I was serving at the Carrington Hotel Gala in Washington. The week before that, I was working at a diner on Clarendon Boulevard, a copy shop in Rosslyn, and cleaning a dentist's office in the evenings. I have also done telemarketing, hostessing, and a summer as a receptionist at a veterinary clinic. I am 26. I have an associate's degree. I left my bachelor's program at George Mason 3 months ago when my mother was diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma. Is there anything else about my life that the room would like to know? The silence was long. Salvatore at her side made a very small sound in his throat. It was almost, but not quite, a laugh. Vittorio's smile had not moved, but something in his eyes had. And how, Miss Hart, did you come to meet our Adrian? I was carrying a tray of champagne. He looked at me. I looked at him. I did not know who he was. Then my mother had a medical emergency, and he helped me. That is how I came to meet Adrian. You did not know who he was? No. You are certain? I had never heard the name Moretti in my life before last Friday, sir. I grew up in Alexandria. My father was a middle school history teacher. He died when I was 15. My mother was a librarian until 3 years ago. I do not move in circles where your family is discussed. I did not know Adrian. I do not... She paused, and she turned her head slightly, and she looked at Vittorio directly, for the first time, across the long oak table. I do not know you either. I am sorry. I'm sure you are someone important, but I don't know you. Somebody, halfway down the table, coughed. It sounded suspiciously like a laugh being swallowed. Vittorio's jaw tightened. I see, he said. I'm sorry if that was rude. Not at all, Miss Hart. Not at all. It is refreshing. Thank you. Only, if you do not know us, and you did not know Adrian, and you are a waitress with a sick mother and 3 jobs and no connections at all to our world, then what, Miss Hart, is it that you think you are doing in our house today? This was it. She knew it was it. She could feel it, through the wood of the table, through the floor, through the old stones of the house. The room had stopped breathing. She did not look at Adrian. Isabella had told her not to look at him. She did not look at Salvatore either. She looked at Vittorio, and her voice, when it came out of her, was quiet and very steady, and it was her own. I am here because Adrian asked me to come. That is not an answer. It is the only answer I have, sir. He asked me to come. I am not good enough for this room. I know that. Everybody in this room knows that. I know what I am. I'm a waitress who sat at a kitchen table 6 days ago across from a man who told me exactly what his life was, without lying about any of it, and asked me if I wanted to see him again. And I said yes. And this week, he called me at 2 in the morning and he told me what was going to happen today, without lying about that either, and he asked me if I would stand here. And I said yes. That is why I am here. It is not because I am worthy of him. It is because he asked, and because a man who has been lied to his whole life asked a waitress an honest question and did not flinch when she gave him an honest answer. And I will not. Her voice cracked, just barely, and she steadied it. I will not be the person who makes him regret asking. The room was very still. Vittorio looked down at the papers in front of him. He looked up. He looked at Adrian, then back at Lila. Miss Hart, he said softly. Yes. Do you love him? She did not hesitate. She did not have to think. The question went into her and came out of her as one motion, and somewhere in the back of her mind she knew she had not yet said this to Adrian. She had not said it on the phone Thursday night. She had not said it in the car this morning. And she was saying it here, first, in front of 9 strangers. And she could not afterward remember making any decision about it. Yes, she said. Adrian beside her did not move. He did not turn his head. but his hand, under the edge of the table, found hers and held it. Vittorio stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, a small, tight, dangerous smile, and he leaned back in his chair. "Well," he said, "cousin, I must congratulate you. You have found a very interesting girl." "Yes," Adrian said, "I have. We have, however, a matter to discuss. The paper in front of me. The question of your fitness." "Then discuss it, Vittorio. The floor is yours." "You would have me do this in front of her? You chose to have this meeting in front of her the moment you demanded she come. You do not now get to say it is inappropriate that she is here." Vittorio's mouth thinned. He looked for a long moment like a man who had come to a fight with one weapon and discovered too late that his opponent had brought another. He began to speak. He spoke for a long time. About tradition. About what it meant to lead a family that had survived nearly a century in this country. About the dangers of a head of the household who brought civilians into the fold, who softened, who, he said this looking directly at Lila for the first time, who allowed himself to be distracted at a critical juncture by a pretty face and a sad story. Lila did not flinch. She sat. She breathed. She looked at whoever was speaking. When Vittorio addressed her directly, she met his eyes, and she did not look away. And she did not speak, because Adrian had not asked her to speak again, and because Isabella had told her, silence in that room is a weapon, and because she had already used her one shot, and she had used it well. Across the table, Renata was watching her. Halfway through Vittorio's speech, Renata looked down at her own hands, and slowly, deliberately, she reached out, and she took the paper in front of her, the one she had signed, and she slid it quietly, with 2 fingers, back into the center of the table, away from Vittorio's pile. Salvatore saw it. His eyes flicked once. When Vittorio finished, there was a long silence. Salvatore cleared his throat. "Vittorio," he said softly, "you called this meeting. You have 5 signatures. I believe, however, that one of those signatures has just declined to proceed. Renata." "Uncle," Renata's voice was quiet, but it was clear. "I am withdrawing my name." Vittorio's head snapped toward her. "Renata, I am withdrawing my name, Vittorio." "Why?" "Because I was wrong." The room drew a single breath. "Moretti." "We now," Salvatore said very gently, "have 4 signatures against 5. The meeting cannot proceed under our rules. The matter is closed. For today." Vittorio sat very still. A muscle in his cheek moved, once, twice. He looked at Adrian. He looked at Lila. He looked for a long moment at Renata, and his eyes were the eyes of a man memorizing a face for later. Then he stood. He did not speak. He gathered his papers, he walked the long length of the room to the door, and he paused there, and he turned. "Cousin," he said quietly, "congratulations. Vittorio, we will see each other again soon." "I am sure we will." Vittorio left. The door closed behind him. The men at the table began to breathe again, slowly, one by one, as if they had all been underwater and had just surfaced. Under the edge of the table, Adrian's hand tightened around Lila's and did not let go. For a long moment after the door closed behind Vittorio, nobody at the table said anything. For a long moment after the door closed behind Vittorio, nobody at the table said anything. The grandfather clock in the corner of the long hall ticked. Somewhere outside, a gull was crying over the bay. Lila could feel very distinctly the pressure of Adrian's thumb against the back of her hand under the edge of the table, and she could feel, even more distinctly, that her own hand had gone cold, the way hands went cold when the body finally remembered that it had been standing on a wire for the last 20 minutes and had forgotten to be afraid. Salvatore rose slowly. He set both hands flat on the table and he looked down the length of it at the remaining 8 faces. "We are done for today," he said. "Go home. Kiss your wives. Hold your children. Do not speak of this morning outside this room. And pray, with whatever part of yourselves still knows how to pray, that my nephew Vittorio comes to his senses before my nephew Adrian is forced to help him come to them. That is all." One by one the men stood. They did not file out immediately. 2 of them, older, heavy-set, gray, came to Adrian and spoke with him quietly, a hand on his shoulder, a nod at Lila, a murmured word in Italian that she did not understand. A third, younger, a man she had not seen speak once, simply crossed to where Lila sat and bowed his head to her, a small, old-fashioned bow, and said, "Miss Hart," and walked on. Renata came last. She stopped in front of Lila's chair. Her eyes were wet. She did not speak. She reached out, and she took Lila's free hand in both of her own, and she held it for the length of 3 slow breaths, and then she nodded once, sharply, like a woman making a private promise to herself, and she left the room. Salvatore waited until they had all gone. He poured himself a glass of water from a pitcher on the sideboard. He drank it in 2 swallows. He set the glass down. Then he turned to Lila, and his face, for the first time, did the small, quiet, tired thing that was the closest Salvatore Moretti had come in 30 years to letting a stranger see him be human. "Miss Hart," he said. "Lila. May I call you Lila?" "Please." "Lila, I want you to understand what you did in this room today. I do not know if you understand it. I do not know if you can. But I would like, if you will permit me, to explain." "Okay. My nephew Vittorio has been preparing for this morning for 4 years. 4 years, Lila. Every handshake, every favor, every wedding he attended where he made sure to sit next to the right cousin. All of it was for today. He came in here this morning with 5 signatures and a plan that he had walked through 100 times in his head, and in every one of those walkthroughs, there was a girl in a chair at the end of the table who was crying, or who was glaring, or who was looking at my nephew Adrian for help. In none of them, not one, was there a girl who told him, to his face, that she did not know who he was." The old man smiled, and it was a strange, sad, proud smile. "You pulled the floor out from under him with one sentence. I don't know you either. I'm sorry. I will remember that sentence, Lila, until the day I die. I didn't mean to be. You did not mean to be anything. That is why it worked. A planned sentence from a practiced woman he would have cut in half. He did not know what to do with a real sentence from a real person. He is not used to them. None of us are." He looked at Adrian. "Nepoti." A word. Adrian rose. He touched Lila's shoulder, once, briefly, and he followed his uncle to the far end of the room, where the 2 men stood by the stone fireplace and spoke in low, rapid Italian for perhaps 3 minutes. Lila could not understand them. She did not need to. She could read enough in the old man's hand on her nephew's elbow, in the slow nod Adrian gave him near the end, in the single word Salvatore said that made Adrian close his eyes for one long second, to know that some piece of a very old conversation between these 2 men had, this morning, found its ending. When Adrian came back to her, his eyes were different. Not calmer, different. "We can go," he said quietly. "Okay. My uncle would like to invite you to dinner here next Sunday. You do not have to say yes today. You can think about it, but the invitation is, it is not a small thing. Tell him yes." "Lila?" "Tell him yes, Adrian." He nodded. He crossed back to Salvatore and spoke briefly. Salvatore's old face did something that on a softer man would have been a smile. He kissed his nephew once on each cheek, and he came to Lila, and he took both her hands, and he bent and kissed them the way a man in a black and white movie would have kissed a hand, with a formality that was half serious and half joke, and wholly, somehow, moving. "Sunday then, Miss Hart. 6 o'clock. We will eat too much, and my housekeeper will fuss at me about the salt. It is the best thing I can offer you. It is not small. I'll be here, sir." "Good girl." They walked out of the long hall together, Adrian's hand at the small of her back, not touching, just there. In the entrance hall, Isabella was waiting. Of all people, she had driven down separately, Lila would learn later, in case any emergency alterations were needed. And when she saw Lila's face, she simply nodded once, sharply, with something like fierce approval in her eyes, and did not say anything at all. The drive back to Washington was quiet for a long time. Adrian sat with his hand in Lila's between them. Outside, the brown fields went past again, in the other direction, and the afternoon had softened into the kind of long yellow November light that made the world look like an old photograph. Neither of them spoke for almost 30 miles. Then Lila said, very softly to the window, "Adrian." "Yes." "I said it, didn't I?" "Yes." "Out loud, in front of 9 people, before I said it to you." "Yes." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Lila, don't." His voice snagged, and he cleared his throat and he tried again. Don't be sorry, please. It is the best thing that has ever been said about me in a room in that house. I am not going to be sorry about it, and I don't want you to be. Okay? Lila? Yes. I have loved you since Thursday. I loved you louder today. I will love you, probably, worse tomorrow. I wanted to make sure you knew. She turned her face against his shoulder, and she cried. A little, without sound, the way she had cried on the phone on Thursday night. He put his arm around her carefully, like she was something he had been given on loan, and he let her cry into his charcoal suit, and he did not tell her anything was going to be easy, because nothing between them ever was, and he did not lie. Vittorio did not come to his senses, of course. The old man had known it when he said it. Adrian had known it. Even Lila, who had spent 30 seconds in a room with Vittorio Moretti, had known it. Men like that did not as a rule come to their senses. They came, instead, to other rooms. Quieter rooms. Rooms with smaller audiences and sharper plans. For 4 months, the Moretti family held. Christmas came. Adrian brought Lila to Salvatore's Sunday dinners all winter, and Lila learned, slowly, awkwardly, making mistakes that the old man patiently and kindly did not correct, the names of 31 first and second cousins, and the stories that went with them. She learned who had married whom and why, and who did not speak to whom and why, and which child had been sent to which boarding school in which country, and which aunt made the sauce that nobody else was allowed to touch. She was not polished into these people. She remained a waitress from Alexandria with a laugh that was a little too loud in small rooms, but she was, in a way she could not have predicted in November, absorbed. Salvatore adored her. Renata, who had signed the paper and taken it back, became something like a friend. Even the old cousins, the ones who had looked at her that first Sunday in December with arms crossed, softened by February into a wary, puzzled affection, because Lila Hart did not play their game, and people who did not play their game were, after a lifetime of games, surprisingly restful to be around. Her mother began the real protocol on the first Monday of December. By mid-January, Eleanor Hart's blood work had turned a corner that none of the doctors at Hopkins had dared to promise. By March, she was taking short walks, on Adrian's arm, on the path beside the Potomac. She still tired. She still had bad days. But she was, undeniably, coming back. Lila would stand at her mother's kitchen window some mornings and watch the two of them moving slowly together on the path, her mother in her old winter coat and her hand tucked firmly through the elbow of a man who had once, she remembered with a strange small jolt, called a private doctor out of nowhere in a black car on a November night, and she would feel something in her chest that was not quite joy and not quite grief. It was gratitude, she thought, but an older kind of gratitude, the kind that comes after the fear has gone. When a person is left holding the fact of how close they had come to losing everything and does not know where exactly to put it down. And then, in mid-March, on a Tuesday night, a man that Lila had never met was shot and killed on a street in Baltimore. He had been one of Adrian's men. Not senior. A younger cousin of a cousin, 26 years old, who had been sent to pick up a shipment of what was by then, officially, dry goods. Adrian's long, quiet transformation of the old businesses into sunlight businesses had been moving, that winter, faster than anybody outside his private rooms realized. The young man had been shot in the head, at close range, by a shooter on a motorcycle. There were no witnesses. There was no warning. The kid's name was Dominic, and he had a pregnant fiancée in Glen Burnie, and when Adrian got the call at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, he had been sitting on Lila's couch watching an old movie with her and her mother, eating popcorn out of a yellow ceramic bowl. And when his phone rang and he looked at the screen, his whole face went to a place Lila had not seen it go before. He stood up. He walked into the kitchen. He did not raise his voice. The conversation was 2 minutes long. When he came back into the living room, he sat down on the couch again, and he turned to Lila, and he said very quietly, "I have to go to Baltimore tonight. Dominic was killed." "Oh my God." "I'll be back tomorrow, possibly the day after. Marco is going to be outside with 2 other men. Catalina is already on her way. Please do not go outside until I call you." "Adrian?" "I know. Is this Vittorio?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Yes," he said. "Are you sure?" "I am sure." "What are you going to do?" He looked at her. He looked at Eleanor, who was watching him with the steady, grave eyes of a woman who had seen enough life to know what was happening. He looked at the popcorn bowl. "I'm going to do the last thing I ever wanted to do," he said. "I'm going to sit down with my cousin Vittorio in a quiet room with my uncle Salvatore present, and I'm going to give him one opportunity to walk away. From Dominic. From whatever he is planning next. From the piece of the family he still has under him. I'm going to give him that opportunity because my uncle asked me to, and because Dominic had a mother, and because Dominic's mother does not need a war on top of a funeral. That is what I'm going to do tonight. Whether he takes it," his jaw tightened. "Whether he takes it is up to him." Adrian, Lila, I will not lie to you. You asked me in November not to lie to you, and I promised I would not. If he does not take it, then I will have to do something I have been trying not to do since I was 26. I will do it quickly and cleanly, and I will do it without you in the room or anywhere near the room, and I will come back to you when it is done. And I will tell you every piece of it that you want to know, and I will hide nothing. That is what I can promise you tonight. She looked at him for a long moment. She had known this might come. She had, in a sense, known this would come. She had signed up for it, in a farmhouse on the bay in November, without saying so out loud. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Come back to me." "I will." He kissed her, then, for the first time in front of her mother, on the forehead, with a tenderness that cracked something open in her chest, and then he was gone, and the front door closed, and Catalina arrived 15 minutes later with her overnight bag and her kind, quiet face, and Eleanor took her daughter's hand and squeezed once and did not let go. He was gone for 34 hours. When he came back, he was pale, and he was tired, and he had a small cut on his left cheekbone that had been cleaned and butterflied. He did not, it turned out, need to do the thing he had been trying not to do since he was 26. Vittorio had taken the opportunity. He had taken it, according to Salvatore's telling, because at the very last moment, with Salvatore sitting across from him in a small room in a restaurant in Little Italy, the old man had reached across the table and taken his younger nephew's face in both his hands and had said, in Italian, "Figlio mio, please, I have already lost your father. Do not make me bury you too." And Vittorio, who had been a small boy when his own father had died, who had been raised in part by Salvatore, who had been loved by the old man in the way he had never quite been loved by anyone else, had, in the privacy of that room, finally broken. Not all the way. Men like Vittorio did not break all the way, but enough. Enough to agree to step back, enough to agree to move to Florida, enough to leave, by the end of the month, the pieces of the family that had been under him, and to take with him only the private wealth that had always been his, and a promise that he would not lift a hand toward any Moretti again for as long as he lived. He held that promise. He would hold it, Lila learned over the years, until the end of his life. People would disagree later about why. Some said fear. Some said exhaustion. Salvatore, on his own deathbed 11 years later, would tell Lila, holding her hand, at 91, his voice paper thin, that he believed Vittorio had, in that room, come as close as a man like him came to being ashamed of himself. That was all any of them got. It was enough. Adrian and Lila were married on a Saturday in October of the following year. It was not the wedding Lila had imagined, in any of the small, soft imaginings of her 20s. It was not at the farmhouse on the bay, because Adrian had wanted, very specifically, for their marriage not to begin inside the old family house. It was not in a cathedral, because Lila, who had been raised by a librarian and a history teacher, had never been that kind of bride. It was in the small wooden chapel on a private piece of land that Adrian had owned, it turned out, for the better part of a decade. The house in Virginia that he had mentioned on their first dinner, the one he had bought because he wanted a room in the world where nobody could reach him. The chapel had been built in 1872. It sat on a low hill above a creek. There was an apple orchard behind it. On the morning of the wedding, the trees were heavy with late fruit, and the ground under them was covered in fallen leaves the color of a new penny. Eleanor walked her daughter down the aisle. She was thin, still. She would always, afterward, be thinner than she had been before August of that first year. But she was upright, and she was steady, and her face, when she lifted Lila's veil and kissed her on the cheek at the altar, was the face of a woman who had been given a gift she had stopped believing she would live to see. "I love you, baby," Eleanor whispered. "Go on now. He's waiting." Salvatore officiated. He had been a widower for 22 years. He was not, strictly, licensed to marry anyone, but the state of Virginia had been persuaded, by lawyers Adrian did not bother to explain to Lila, to grant him a one-time ceremonial authority. He shook a little, reading the words. He had to stop twice. Renata stood behind Lila as her matron of honor. Marco, the quiet driver, stood behind Adrian as best man, in a dark suit that did not quite fit his shoulders and his eyes. In the middle of the vows, filled with water, which surprised everyone in the chapel, including Marco. Catalina was in the second row. Isabella was in the third. Margaret, the head of the catering staff at the Carrington Hotel, who had received a handwritten letter of invitation from Lila in August and had written back a short, stunned reply that she would be honored, sat in the fifth row in a navy dress she had bought for the occasion and cried, quietly, through the whole ceremony, and would never afterward be quite able to explain to anyone why. Adrian's vows were short. He had written them himself on a sheet of hotel stationery the night before. He read them with his hands shaking, which Lila had not thought his hands did. "Lila Hart," he said, "I met you in a room full of lies. You were the first true thing in it. I had been in rooms like that for 20 years, and I had stopped expecting true things. And I walked in that night intending to stand near a pillar for 20 minutes and leave. I'm standing here today because you carried a tray past me and a tear on your cheek, and because I could not walk past you, and because for reasons I could not then explain and cannot fully explain now, everything I had been trying to build alone for 8 years suddenly seemed, in the space of 90 seconds, like something I had been building for you. I am not a simple man. I will not be a simple husband. I have not been a good man in many of the ways people measure good men, and I will not pretend to you or to any of these witnesses that I am beginning today as someone I am not. I am only promising, in front of this old man who is half my father and this old chapel and this woman who gave you to the world, that from this morning onward, whatever I become will be, every day, a little more of the man you saw in me that I had stopped seeing in myself. I will fail at this. I will fail in small ways every week, and in large ways, probably, once or twice in our life. When I fail, you will tell me, and I will come home, and we will begin again. That is all I have. That is everything. Lila's vows, by contrast, were 11 words. She had told Adrian the night before that she had tried to write more and could not. He had kissed her forehead and said that was fine. I love you, she said. I saw you. I see you. I won't stop. They were married. Salvatore, in a tremor of a voice that no one in that chapel would ever forget, pronounced them husband and wife. Adrian bent and kissed his wife, and Lila's hand went, as it had on the porch in November, and in the car to Chesapeake in November, and in every room since, to the side of his face, as if to check every time that he was still there. They lived. That was the part that Lila, looking back at 60, would find the hardest to describe to her daughter, who asked her one evening on the porch of the house in Virginia. The daughter's name was Eleanor, for her grandmother, and she was 17 at the time and applying to colleges. Mama, what was it like? After. The years after. The years after were not a montage. That was what Lila told her daughter. The years after were a lot of weekdays, a lot of mornings with coffee, a lot of nights when Adrian came home late from a meeting with lawyers trying to disentangle one of the old family businesses from its past, and a lot of nights when he came home early. A lot of weekends in the farmhouse on the bay after Salvatore, growing older, had quietly handed the house over to them. A lot of Tuesday dinners with Eleanor in Alexandria, until Eleanor died, peacefully, in her sleep, at 74, 9 years into Lila and Adrian's marriage, a death she had borrowed. She told Lila on the last good afternoon, from a fate she had long ago made her peace with losing. The foundation came in the second year of their marriage. Lila had been thinking about it for a long time. She sat at Adrian's desk in the house in Virginia one Sunday afternoon in January, and she wrote on a legal pad the rough outline of what she wanted. A medical fund, not a charity. She had known, in the 3 months she had spent begging charities for help with her mother's drugs, how charities worked, but a direct fund for families like the one she had been. For the daughter of the middle school teacher in a town somewhere in this country who came home one Tuesday to find her mother on the kitchen floor and a diagnosis the insurance would not cover. She did not want a gala. She did not want a board of trustees with names in the newspaper. She wanted a phone number a scared young woman could call at 9 p.m. on a Friday, and a person on the other end who would say, "Okay, tell me her name, tell me the drug, tell me the dose, tell me where you are. We can help." Adrian read the legal pad. He looked up at her with eyes that had, at 43, started to show the first faint lines at the corners that she had not noticed on him at 41, and he said, How much? "I don't know yet. It would depend how many families, per year, to start." "Lila, how much?" "I don't... Adrian, I'd have to do the math." "Approximate. If we were serious, real money, real drugs, 200 families a year, at least, maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 million a year at the start." He nodded slowly. "Do it," he said. "Adrian, do it. The old businesses are generating money I do not know what to do with. I have been trying to put it into sunlight for 8 years. This is sunlight. You run it. I'll fund it. You do not have to ask my permission for any of it. You do not have to answer to a board. It is yours. I only ask," he paused, and he looked down at the legal pad, "that you name it for your mother." She looked at him for a long moment. "The Eleanor Hart Foundation." Yes, she did not cry. She had, by that point, cried enough about her mother and about her life, and about the long, strange, unlikely shape of what had happened to her, that there were some moments now that did not require tears. She simply nodded, once, and she reached across the desk, and she put her hand flat against the side of his face, the way she had since the chapel. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I'll do it." The foundation took its first call in June of that year. The woman on the other end of the line was a graduate student from Columbus, Ohio. Her mother had lung cancer. The insurance had denied an appeal the week before. The graduate student had been Googling at 3 in the morning for help, and had found a number at the bottom of a small white website that did not look like a scam and did not look like a gala. She called it expecting to leave a voicemail. Lila, who had hired exactly 2 people at that point, and who had personally taken the first month calls out of her own kitchen because she wanted to hear what the voices actually sounded like, answered the phone. "This is the Eleanor Hart Foundation," Lila said. "My name is Lila. Tell me what's happening. Take your time." The graduate student cried first, then she talked. Lila took notes. By 9 a.m. the next morning, a pharmacy in Columbus was filling a prescription that had been denied 6 days earlier. By noon, the graduate student's mother was receiving an infusion that nobody had been able to pay for a week before. By the following Monday, a paralegal the foundation kept on retainer was filing the paperwork that would force the insurance company, eventually, 7 months later, to cover the remainder of the protocol themselves. It was the foundation's first case. Lila kept the legal pad on which she had taken those first notes in the top drawer of her desk for the next 27 years. By the end of that first full calendar year, the foundation had helped 41 families. By the 5th year, 400. By the 10th, more than 3,000. It was never, in any of those years, a large foundation by the standards of American foundations. It was never in the newspapers. Lila was not ever, in any of those years, on the cover of a magazine, though she was asked 3 times and politely declined each. She had no interest in being a figure. She had interest in answering the phone at 3 in the morning. Adrian, over the same years, did the slow, private, unglamorous work of dismantling pieces of his family's old shape and rebuilding them in the open. The harbor company was sold. The union contracts were allowed to sunset. The construction business was turned into something that paid its taxes and bid on contracts the same way other construction businesses bid on them, and that, slowly, over a decade, stopped being a business anyone outside Virginia thought of as a Moretti business at all. He was not loved by everyone in his family for doing this. He lost, over those years, some cousins. He gained, over those years, some sleep. It was on balance a trade he was willing to make. He handed leadership of what remained of the family to a young cousin named Luca in year 12 of their marriage, at a dinner at the farmhouse on the bay on a Sunday in late spring. Salvatore was very old by then and very frail, and had cried a little at the announcement, the way old men cry, quietly, without embarrassment, as at a memory rather than a loss. Luca was 34. He had been groomed gently for the role for 6 years. He had a law degree. He had, more importantly, a conscience, which was not a thing every Moretti man had been born with in the old days. Under Luca, in the years that followed, The family's last remaining quiet businesses would go into sunlight too, one by one. And by the time little Eleanor Moretti was applying to college at 17, there would be almost nothing left of the old house her father had been born into except the stone farmhouse on the bay and a set of dinners on Sundays that were, by then, just dinners. There were hard years in there. Lila would tell her daughter, sitting on the porch that night, about a November 11 years into her marriage, when Adrian had been in a hospital bed for 18 days after a heart event that had come very close to taking him. And she had sat by his bed for all 18 days, and she had learned a thing about herself in those 18 days, a thing about the shape of fear, about the particular color it turns when you have already lost one parent, and cannot imagine losing the man who has become your whole weather, that she would not, afterward, ever entirely unlearn. He had come home. He had changed his diet. He had, grudgingly, mostly, stopped drinking the bourbon. He had started walking every morning at 6 a.m. along the creek behind the farmhouse, and Lila had walked with him, every morning for the rest of their life together, through the snow and the rain and the August heat, because she had made a small private promise to herself in that hospital that she would walk beside him every morning he was given, for as long as he was given them. There were softer years, too, of course. The year they had adopted a dog. The year they had put in a vegetable garden that Adrian, who had been raised in a townhouse in Baltimore, did not know how to tend and insisted on tending anyway. The year Salvatore had died peacefully at 91 with Lila's hand in his and had spoken to her, not to Adrian, not to Luca, but to Lila, his last coherent sentence, which had been, in Italian, which she had by then learned enough to follow, Figlia, you have been a gift to my nephew and to my tired old house, and I am taking the thanks of this family with me where I am going. And there was, of course, Eleanor. She came, impossibly, in year 14. Lila had been 42. Adrian had been 54. The pregnancy had been difficult in ways that Lila, looking back, could not quite bring herself to narrate to her daughter across the porch table. But Eleanor had come. On a gray morning in February, in a hospital in Charlottesville, with Adrian holding her hand and crying in a way that Lila had never seen him cry. Not in the chapel, not at his own uncle's funeral, not anywhere. He had looked down at the small, red-wrinkled face in the blanket, and he had said, very softly, in a voice that cracked twice, "Oh, there you are. I have been waiting for you." They had named her Eleanor Ruth. Eleanor for Lila's mother. Ruth for Adrian's mother, whose face he could barely remember, and whose voice he could not remember at all. Her middle name had been a gift to a 6-year-old boy in Baltimore who had lost his mother too young and had, for 50 years afterward, not quite let himself grieve her out loud. She grew up in the farmhouse on the bay, in the summers, and in the house in Virginia during the school year. She was a serious child and a funnier teenager than Lila had been at her age. She played viola, badly, for 4 years, and soccer, badly, for 2. She read everything. She was closer to her father than she was to her mother, for most of her childhood, and closer to her mother than she was to her father in the years that came later, which Lila always thought was the most ordinary and therefore the most reassuring thing about her. On the porch that evening, Eleanor, 17, in a sweatshirt, applying to colleges, had asked her mother the question that had set all of this remembering in motion. "Mama, what was it like? After, the years after?" Lila had been quiet for a long time. The sun had been setting over the orchard. Somewhere in the house, Adrian, 69, gray, still upright, still walking every morning along the creek, had been making dinner, badly, with the dog at his feet. "Honey," Lila had said at last, I think the thing nobody tells you about stories like ours is that the good part isn't the beginning. It isn't the ballroom. It isn't the rescue. It isn't the big meeting in the big house with the big men, though all of that happened, and it was what it was. The good part is the Tuesday. The good part is the 5th Tuesday. The good part is the 10,000th Tuesday. When you have been married to somebody long enough that you have fought about the same stupid thing about the dishwasher 40 times, and you still want to sit on the porch with them at the end of the day and tell them a small thing that happened at the grocery store. That's the part that costs. That's the part that matters. Beginnings are easy. Beginnings are cheap. The part nobody tells you about, the part that takes real courage, the part I did not know I was signing up for when I stood in that chapel, is staying. Every day, choosing the same person, on purpose, When you're tired and they are tired and nothing is romantic and the dog is thrown up on the rug. That's the whole trick. Everything else is the story people tell at parties. Eleanor, 17, had been quiet. Then she had said, "Mama, that's not even slightly inspirational." And Lila, 60, had laughed. A real laugh, loud. The one Adrian had said he had fallen in love with over a story about a stray cat. And she had said, I know it isn't, but it's the truth. And you asked, and you are old enough now that I am not going to lie to you." Inside the house, Adrian dropped a pot. "Lila," he yelled. "Lila, come quick. I have done a thing to the risotto." "I'll bet you have," Lila called back. She stood slowly. Her knees, at 60, were not what they had been at 26. She kissed her daughter on the top of the head. "I love you, honey," she said. "I love you too, Mama. Go finish your essay." "Okay." Lila walked into the house. The lights in the kitchen were warm. Adrian, 69, gray at the temples, thinner than he had been at 41, the white scar on the side of his thumb still there, was standing at the stove with a dish towel in one hand, surveying the damage. He looked up when she came in. His face did the small, quiet thing it had been doing for 34 years when she walked into a room, the thing that had nothing to do with the way he looked at anyone else, ever. "I have ruined the risotto," he said. "I can see that, honey. I am sorry. I forgive you. What shall we do?" "We'll order a pizza." "Lila, we do not order pizza. We have never, in this house, ordered pizza." "Then tonight, my love," she said, stepping close to him, putting her hand against the side of his face, the way she had since the chapel, the way she had since the porch in November a lifetime ago. "Tonight we start." He laughed, a real laugh. The kind of laugh that Vittorio Moretti, on some long-ago Sunday in a stone farmhouse on the bay, had not believed Adrian Moretti capable of. He bent and he kissed her. Not on the forehead, not anymore, they were long past foreheads. And he held her for a long moment in the warm kitchen, among the ruin of the risotto and the waiting dog, and the distant sound of their daughter on the porch talking on the phone to someone in her college application list. Outside, the last of the light had gone. The orchard was a dark line against a darker sky. Somewhere on the creek, a heron called once and was quiet. Lila rested her cheek against her husband's shoulder, and she thought, not in words exactly, but in something older than words, the thing she thought every night at this hour, the thing she had thought every night at this hour for 29 years. We made this. Out of a tray of champagne and a phone call and a porch in November, we made this. Nobody handed it to us. Nobody could have. We chose it, every day, on purpose. That, she understood, was the thing. That was the whole thing, not who they had been, who they had chosen together, day after day, to become.